All right, well, we are at just past 11. Could go ahead and get started. Want to thank everyone for joining us today to the first online version of the BIMxt Richmond meeting. Typically, this is one of our in-city events. We had some scheduling hiccups, a little bit of snafu, so we decided to take a cue from our BIMxt online events and put this one online as well. Really excited to have everyone here. I'm looking at the attendee list, some names I definitely know from Central Virginia and some folks who are definitely not in Virginia right now. Beautiful sunny day out there, though, for those of you in RVA. So those of you here, welcome. Those of you not around and out of town, thanks for joining us. So BIMxt Richmond, like I said, it's one of our in-person events. We have a handful of other in-person live city events. You can see them listed there on the left-hand side. We also have our BIMxt online meeting. We meet quarterly, do something very similar to this. We get together, share ideas, have presenters talk about BIM technology, design technology, projects they might be working on that did something clever, any opportunity to kind of share things with the community. That's something we try to do here at CADD is foster education to allow people to innovate and save yourselves time. Here in Richmond specifically, this is our board of advisors. Normally we have them stand up. They stand up now, wouldn't matter, but we've got Nathan and Dwayne and Chris and Janet. This is your folks. There's me and Lee over there on the side there. I'm not sure who is here today, but thanks for joining. Thanks for your time. Thanks for all you do. And if you have ideas or if you have questions, these are the folks who kind of review the submissions and help us get things going. So with that, here's today's agenda. My name is Jason Kunkel. I'm with CADD Microsystems. I'm just kind of bookending this whole thing. The meat of the presentation here today, we've got Alec from Coda. Alec and I have crossed paths over the last decade on and off. Very excited to have him here. He's a great presenter. After that, it's kind of a part two for the folks who have made it to the in-person event. We've got Nathan and Chris with an AI follow-up. So I don't remember how long ago we had the original presentation of this, but this is like what's going on now. Filling in some gaps, probably taking some items off the presentation and adding some items to the presentation as well. So, and afterwards, with the time allotted, we'll go through questions. With that, Zoom has a chat function. Please use the chat there. Feel free to chat whatever you want, but this is where your questions should go. I'll keep an eye on this, and I will share these with the presenters once we get to that 11:50 slot. So. With that, Alec, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm really excited to see. I don't know if this is a specific project or general healthcare in general, but should be good.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. Appreciate the intro. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. And if you wouldn't mind just confirming that you can see my screen, Jason.
Looks good.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm very excited to be here. As Jason mentioned, my path has crossed with CADD Micro over the last decade plus. It's great to be back here presenting with you all. And I'm very excited to talk about technology and automation in the context of healthcare design and construction. It's a personal passion of mine. So I really do believe there is a tremendous opportunity, a tremendous potential for technology to impact the outcome of projects, and not just for healthcare, but really all projects in general. And that is why, groups like BIMxt are so important, so critical for our industry. And this may sound a little altruistic, but I really do believe that great change comes when people gather and they center around a shared mission and a shared passion. So thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to start the conversation here by sharing some of the more macro trends we've observed that have really a direct impact on how healthcare facilities are designed, constructed, and operated. And this will kind of lead into some of the specific challenges we've seen and some specific project examples around all of this. But I'll start with siloed value chain here. Like, what do I mean by that? Well, in design and construction and operations, there are more stakeholders involved in the process, and increasingly, they are taking on a smaller slice of scope or risk. So essentially what we're seeing is risk being transferred to others. And what that means for a project is that oftentimes there are poorer transitions from design, construction, operations, really just more opportunities for things to slip through the cracks and really impact the outcome of the project in the end. So that's a siloed value chain. That's how I would probably summarize that particular trend. Another trend here that we're seeing is around workforce shortage. And I think of this in a few different domains. When I think about design and construction and a project coming to life, for sure, I think about field labor, people in the field actually turning our projects, turning our concepts into a reality. There is a shortage there. As it relates to healthcare, I think a lot about the planning, design, and construction teams within organizations. They are short-staffed. And for sure in healthcare, clinical teams are short-staffed. The nurses, the providers, they are all being asked to do a lot more with less. There's an interesting stat I wanted to share here from the AGC, which is 30 to 40% of the construction workforce is set to retire in the next 10 years. So that is a big thing we all need to be thinking about. And I really think the silver lining here is that technology can help drive efficiency in project development, full stop. There's an opportunity really for organizations to leverage technology and also shore up their teams who really have fewer staff to deliver work. It's a big opportunity. The last two trends I want to just briefly touch on here directly relate to the presentation today. Advancing technology. The reality is that there are a number of tools on the market, and it seems like that number of tools, it's growing exponentially almost every day, right? So there are many technologies. A lot of times they offer point solutions to a particular problem, and oftentimes they're disconnected from an organization's suite of tools. So what you end up with is essentially this technology landscape in organizations that is somewhat disjointed. It's been cobbled together over years, and it's a really big challenge for organizations to grapple with. And again, they are already short-staffed. Their time is already limited. So big problem. And a related problem here is proliferation of data. So the reality is that our industry as a whole generates vast volumes of data, and it's all in different formats. So what we're seeing is that data management is a particular challenge. It's tedious, it's time consuming, and the reality is it results in inefficiency, redundancy, and wasted cost. So again, these four key market trends are things that we're seeing. I'm sure some of this will resonate with the audience here, and probably you could add others. But I wanted to paint this as sort of some context behind what we'll talk about in the coming slides. So when I think about project development and I think about design, construction, the process as a whole, we really center around four major problem areas. I mean, there are many problems to be solved, no doubt, but we center around four major problem areas that we believe technology has an opportunity to positively impact. So those are underground coordination, existing conditions, design coordination, and facility data, or O&M data strategy. So each of these challenges presents itself more prominently, I suppose, during different stages of a project's life cycle. But approaching any of these with a proactive mindset can really help mitigate risk in design and construction and improve the outcome of the project as a whole. This morning, I'm going to dive into a few specific examples of these themes and highlight the role that technology played in the process. I'll kind of work my way from timeline left to right, and I'll probably focus more on the first three here: underground coordination, existing conditions, and design coordination. So getting into it, I want to start with underground coordination. This is a particular challenge that we've observed on almost every major capital healthcare projects. The reality is that many projects exist within the context of existing urban areas, and a lot of times the infrastructure and underground conditions in those areas are sometimes unknown. So this is an area we believe technology provides an opportunity, right? There's an opportunity to really allow us to create a more comprehensive view, a digital underground map, as it were, of those existing utilities, of the existing infrastructure at any given site. And there are a number of data sources out there that we can draw on to do this, like existing drawings, public records, even aerial imagery. But the reality is there's a lot of data out there if you know how to wrangle it and curate it. So leveraging even just off-the-shelf technology like Revit, Navisworks, Dynamo, along with some custom-built enhancements in C# and other languages, we're able to really programmatically spot underground coordination issues in a digital format before shovels even hit the ground. Again, tremendous opportunity here, and a lot of this could be done manually in theory. Like you could go out, you could gather all this data individually, you could figure out the best way to curate it and spot issues, underground issues. But because we have so many technologies at our fingertips, we're able to do that, aggregate, curate significantly faster and with a higher degree of accuracy. So the example I have on screen here is what we call a composite sheet. It's really a catalog of the different underground utilities for any site. And what we can do here, again, programmatically, is highlight areas of conflict, present really what we consider a confidence or a certainty score for each utility's location. So again, when you think about a project development and project lifecycle, underground coordination is something that is such a big challenge. Utility strikes are a huge problem for our industry and very costly, but we're finding ways, creative ways to leverage technology and get ahead of that as a problem. I want to move on and talk a bit about existing conditions. Existing conditions are another big challenge we see quite often in healthcare. The reality is that greenfield new construction projects are rarely the norm. They do happen sometimes, and we get involved in those as well. But oftentimes, existing facilities are being renovated, they're being added on to in order to refresh and provide more effective patient care. And because so many healthcare facilities are pretty aged, a lot of them are from the 60s, the 70s. They've morphed over time as improvement projects have been completed. Because of all of that, having an informed understanding of current state as-built is very difficult. I would guess if you went to almost any healthcare facility from the 60s or 70s and you spoke to a facilities guy, he probably has a little section in the basement with physical paper copies of that facility's drawings. And probably things have been slip sheeted in over the years, over the decades, but again, not necessarily a digital format and certainly not organized well. So again, this is a big opportunity for us that we see, digitally cataloging a facility's architectural, mechanical, electrical, other systems. It really provides a digital basis to compare existing conditions against new design when those renovation projects do happen. This is just an image. I love sharing this one. It's an example of a point cloud scan from a recent project we delivered in Baltimore. I want to talk a little bit more about this and existing conditions, digitally documenting, creating that artifact of the facility. The way we do this, the way we think about this is, high accuracy LiDAR scanning, photogrammetry, scan to BIM technology. These are all different tools and techniques in our tool belt to help take on this challenge of existing conditions and form that basis of understanding for as-built. In this particular graphic, you can see pretty plainly a scan to BIM mechanical model. That's what's represented in red. conflicting with a new design model represented in green. So again, because we were able to digitally catalog this particular facility, we were able to spot those issues and better resolve existing conditions with new design. I will say, and I know this is a technology forum, we're talking tech here. Technology helps us form that better understanding of existing conditions, but I will say, and I feel this way, I guess, philosophically about AI and other tools out there, there's an element of human intuition that is needed, always needed, to assess the output of what a technology can give us, okay? So in an example like this, human intuition is still needed to assess the unique conditions and determine a better coordination approach, even if the technology has gotten us 80% of the way there. I want to move on and talk a little bit about design coordination as another challenge. Again, in the context of healthcare specifically, healthcare facilities are incredibly complex spaces to design, construct, and operate. In fact, a recent statistic from Navigant Construction Forum suggests that 4 to 6% of a total project cost can be contributed to construction rework. That's a stat actually that extends beyond healthcare, but it's very prominent in healthcare. So that equates to over 100 billion annually in construction rework. It's a huge problem, right? And it's a huge opportunity. So there are many ways that technology can influence design and construction of a healthcare facility and get ahead of some of that construction rework problem. But I want to highlight a specific challenge here we've seen, and that's around the coordination of medical equipment requirements, okay? And just very briefly to paint the problem here, in a lot of cases for a project, new construction project, medical equipment is selected during the later stages of design. So what that means is that there is a gap, a tangible gap between what has been coordinated during design and what is ultimately specified in the end. So as it relates to medical equipment, essential services like power, water, data, many of those requirements are overlooked and need to be retrofit on site during construction. It's a huge problem. And this is really a problem of scale. So if you think about a singular piece of equipment, maybe it required drainage, there was no drainage accounted for on site during construction. So you have to fix that one instance. Sure, maybe one, it's not a large lift to fix, but the reality is with medical equipment, this is a problem of scale. And for most facilities, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces of medical equipment that need to be coordinated effectively. So again, looking to technology to help provide a solution here, we are able to programmatically spot coordination issues by essentially comparing data from the medical equipment specifications against plans and other design documents. And once again, like we saw in the other examples, a lot of this could be done manually, but because there are so many great technologies and tools out there, we're able to leverage those to increase both the speed and accuracy of this coordination. The result here is fewer on-site retrofits, reduced costs of materials, and construction delay. Again, finding creative ways to leverage that technology to solve a real-world problem. Another related example I wanted to quickly highlight here is around doors, frames, and hardware. It's a similar problem than what we see with medical equipment. Oftentimes, the reality is that there's a mismatch between the hardware schedules, plans, and specifications. There was a recent project in an inpatient healthcare facility that we were involved in recently. It had around 2,700 doors total across all the facilities. And we spotted, again, programmatically, about 10% of those had a mismatch of hardware sets and design documents or specifications. So really without technology, without an automated way to assess that particular project, that disconnect in the doors would have probably gone unnoticed until construction and resulted in significant added cost. So similar problem to what we see with medical equipment, a problem of scale, but one in which technology is there to help support us. So as I start to conclude here, and with those few examples in mind, I just want to kind of reiterate the fact that healthcare development is complex. There are many examples we can point to where technology has resulted in more efficient delivery with fewer errors. What we believe at Coda is that because there are so many different stakeholders involved in this process of design and construction, and so many opportunities for information to be missed, we also lean on dynamic platforms to view and resolve these coordination issues. And these couple screenshots I have here are snapshots from our own homegrown software solution that's really become a centerpiece of how we coordinate with project teams. The platform, we refer to it as Atlas, is really just a dynamic viewer. It's based on Autodesk platform services. And what we're finding is that teams leverage this technology to view project coordination issues and better understand the potential impact of those issues, both in terms of responsibility and cost. So again, more of a coordination tool than anything else, but another example of how technology is really transforming how we deliver projects in the healthcare space. So with that, you can probably sense I'm very passionate about this. I can talk a lot about healthcare. I can talk a lot about digital technologies. I'll conclude, hand it back to Jason here, but please feel free to connect. And if you're interested to learn more about Coda, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks, Alec. That was great. I find it, interesting, just something I didn't even consider, but you nailed it so well. The challenges I think you're seeing are relatively consistent. Renovations and then
right.
spec to actual installation. But what you said, it's the scale, right? I mean,
right.
Anybody who's worked on any healthcare or any hospital, there's not just a renovation where you've got 2 levels off. There's 17 different renovations, and every single floor starts at a different point or something. And
that's right.
If I'm looking around my office, well, I've got a phone and maybe a TV, but every single patient room has got to have just an insane amount of equipment. Just
yes,
insane.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Do you find challenges? Like, I think everybody on the call here, we like technology, we understand the benefits of it. Do you have challenges, or what do you do to kind of convince the client that this is the way to go? Because it's an extra lift and it's outside the norm processes. But how do you, how do you make it sexy for them so they want to hop on board?
I certainly think bringing cost into the equation or into the conversation always grabs attention, right? And especially like the medical equipment example, sure, $1,000, maybe $2,000 to fix one issue, it's probably not going to grab their attention. But if you tell an owner, a healthcare owner, for example, that you have 300 issues related to this particular piece of medical equipment, that's an entirely different scale of cost. So I think for sure bringing cost into it helps really make the problem a little more real, at least from an owner perspective.
Gotcha. Yep, money talks. What are you guys, or what are you personally maybe even seeing as kind of the next things you want to dive into or start picking apart?
Well, I didn't really talk much about it here today, and I know we'll talk a bit about it in a minute here, but AI, there is, again, a tremendous potential here, and this is a good segue. Beyond the core capabilities of something like an AI that can improve the process for us, I mean, there are so many tools out there already leveraging some of that technology. And, the way we approach that is, in general, we're a smaller team, and there's a lot we could build in-house, a lot we could do on our own, but we really do look outward to strategic partner network, really. Like, what are the other tools that are already out there that may be super focused on doing something really well from a technology perspective? How can we fold that into our process and make our delivery better for our healthcare owners? That's how we're thinking about that. So AI, I think in general is is really something we're looking forward to and seeing where that goes.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, sir. That was fantastic. And yes, that was a completely unscripted segue, but it's a great segue. Let's hop over to Nathan and Chris. Thanks for hopping on, guys. As a reminder, if you've got questions, please throw them in the chat. But with that, they are going to hop in and give us, I think, a quick recap and then update on where things are standing with AI in this industry. And I will hit mute and turn it over to you two. Go ahead and see if you can share real quick. Yep. I can see all the PowerPoint. There you go. Perfect.
There you go. Well, good morning, almost afternoon, everybody. Jason, thank you for teeing that up. And Alec, thank you for that presentation. What Chris and I are going to speak about a little bit today, and I'm Nathan Blinn in my day job with Eagle Construction, working through our strategic innovation strategies, our architecture, and our constructability. And then Chris will jump in here in a second. Chris, you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah. Hey, I'm Chris Cromer. I'm an architect with Baskervill here in Richmond. And yeah, I'm someone who I work as a project architect for my normal job, and then also love to kind of delve into new tools and technology. So this is right up my alley. So go ahead, Nathan.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. Well, this is really a follow-up. I think that was kind of alluded to almost exactly a year ago. So it was last September, I believe. We had the first conversation for this group about AI. Certainly not the first conversation you've all been involved in, but for this group. And really what we talked about at that point was, what does it mean for our industry? And let's start a conversation about what it could mean, what it should mean, and where things are headed. What we recognized was that coming in on 12, 13 months later, things have moved, things have changed. We've all learned a lot. These things happen quickly, and so we thought it was good to kind of revisit. And in this forum, what we're going to do is I'll kind of do the little preamble of what we had spoken about last time, and then Chris is going to bring forward some developments, some things he's found, some of what he's worked through. We'd love for you all to throw questions into the chat so we can try to spark that conversation, and we can try to get a little back and forth going here, because this is certainly a conversation that, while it has been topical, isn't going away anytime soon. So the continued conversation we all have as professionals, not just about what it can do, but what it should do for us in our daily work, I think is critically important. And so that's what we're hoping to continue today, a year on from the last time we did it. So really what we talked about last time was just understanding a little bit about what AI meant to us in that conversation. We'll talk a little bit about the progress, what we've seen in applications, and then that's where we'd love to open it to questions and answers about what it could mean moving forward. Let's go and jump to the next one here, Chris. So we started last time with the difference between AI, machine learning, and deep learning, and understanding the variations between that. AI is a very broad term. We use it a lot. Everybody uses it a lot. I think every app that you try to download now says it's AI enabled. Whether that's true or not, we'll leave up to you to decide. But really looking at the spectrum of what is possible within the realm of AI, getting from just the smart machines performing tasks all the way up to machine learning, where they're empowered to make tasks through making decisions in neural networks. And there's a long spectrum. We won't go deep into that. That's not what we're here for today. But really the goal is a lot of some of the tools that we'll talk about really run the spectrum. And I think the conversation about how it could assist us in the architecture, engineering, and construction industries really falls in this spectrum. There's some tasks that are repetitive that we should be using and leaning on AI for to unlock us to be the creative and problem-solving professionals we are. And then there's some other things that it can just, quite frankly, do faster, given the right data and given the right outcomes. So that's what we'll go through a little bit today. So this is where, over the past year, Chris, do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, if you want to jump in here and talk about just the past year since we last spoke about it, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, so these are just some kind of notes about, like, at least from my perspective, what I've observed from the last year of kind of seeing a ton of AI tools kind of saturate the market. But a lot of them were just, they really felt like kind of knee-jerk reactions, or a lot of what Nathan said, where maybe it's tacked on without too much actual thought or work into actually integrating an AI component to a certain tool. But really over the last year, I've seen a lot of growth and kind of maturing some of these tools. And I've seen a lot of people, including myself, start to actually understand how they would work in practice rather than just this idealized, like, oh, AI is just going to fix all these problems and just do my job for me. That's not really realistic. It's more just another tool to add to our toolbox. It's a really, really cool tool, and it can be really, really helpful. But see it as a complement, as something that I can use to get a result. I put in quotes that, more as a consultant. If I want to be able to just take a shorter amount of time, but still have a ton of iterations of a design problem or a planning problem, I can use many of these tools to accomplish that, like just significantly faster than before. And not just kind of dumb iterations, like there's more and more showing like they're really providing some like impressively nuanced solutions to some of these problems. Some other things I noted on here is I'm still seeing factual accuracy being an issue. Some of these are better than others, but I know that when it's more intangible results that I'm trying to accomplish, or more schematic level results, those are really where it shines. It can produce some accurate factual information, but I've really still seen that, like, the need to have people with knowledge and experience to kind of back up and do QC reviews basically of some of those. So those still can be helpful, but it feels like we still got a little bit of a ways to go on some of those. Oh, and the last thing we mentioned a minute or two ago, just the power of automation. Some of these are borderline between just what is just regular programming automation, but some of them really, truly have shown to be impressive as far as utilizing AI to build upon what would normally just be programmed either in code or in something like a tool like Dynamo or something. So we also just kind of, I'm resharing what some of these potential applications are. So if you saw this last time, it'll look familiar, but for a lot of y'all that probably didn't, just kind of looking, the next couple slides are kind of looking at areas that still have the potential to integrate artificial intelligence into their workflows. So like this first slide is talking about construction. There's a ton of different areas. This is right up Nathan's wheelhouse. And do you want to comment on this section at all, Nathan?
Yeah, I think, what was brought up last time has continued to ring true in these categories, is really looking at it as I love the word consultant that you use, Chris. It's, how do we use some of these tools really to empower our work? And so when we start looking at things, it's, when we look at some of these items, there's a lot of repetitive review of things or some trying to make sure you don't leave certain things out. When you're looking at some of these parts of the construction, well, how do we automate these pieces, which then empowers the professionals to focus on the other pieces, the interactions with between architects and construction managers and the horizontal construction components, and how do we empower as professionals? How do we continue to automate the things that should be automated and empower us to spend time in the conversations and relationships that drive project success? And so that's where this whole list came from when I first put it together, and it still rings pretty true. And I think we're still elbowing through which areas are most important to tackle first. And I think that's very individual to the organization you're with too, as far as what the priority is. But that'll continue to be the conversation for a long time in my eyes, is where do we strike first based on our business model and the projects we do.
Awesome. Yeah. Then I know from the architecture side, I've already kind of talked about it a little bit, but especially when it comes to early kind of pre-design, where they call it pre-design programming, schematic design, all of those levels of the design process are proving to be kind of perfectly catered towards using some of these AI tools that can spit out a ton of options that have a lot of kind of nuanced considerations for like the input that you're putting in, and then expanding beyond just the kind of schematic design and rendering phases, getting into material selection. I've got we'll talk about in just a minute, code compliance, even urban planning, site planning. All of these areas are ripe opportunities to use AI-powered tools, at least from the side of architecture. So we had mentioned these in the past, as if anyone isn't familiar with some of these tools, if you haven't delved into any of these AI-powered tools before, if you're on the side of construction, these are definitely great places to start. Nathan, remind me, are y'all utilizing any of these softwares currently?
We're not using any of these personally on the residential side, but these are ones I've spoken to other colleagues that I know have become a little bit more popular just because they're packaged programs and they don't require a computer programmer.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I've used a couple. I know I get it. I've got a ton of I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but benefit out of using open space with a larger contractor on a commercial project, being able to link that with the live Revit model and have the like 360 camera like walkthroughs that the superintendent would do every week. Oh my gosh, that was so useful. So that was really, really cool tool. They've got so much beyond that's just like one tiny example of the kind of things that one can do. So look into those. I've got a ton more that I've added onto our kind of growing list of things, software tools on the side of architecture. So specifically, Revit has the generative design. I believe this was added. I know it was there in 2022. It may have been there a little bit earlier, but for the past couple releases, there's the generative design tools, and I'll show an example of that in a minute, to do furniture layouts. There's lighting studies. There's more. So there's also the relatively new Autodesk Forma platform. That's kind of catered currently towards like urban design, planning. I have actually really been wanting to delve into that more. So hopefully, kind of in the next few months, I can get into that more myself. And then just briefly kind of touching on, Adobe's got their own subset. We've used that in our firm, a handful of people, to use either like the generative fill when you have like an exterior parts of an image that you want to expand, or if you want to just select parts of it and edit it. It's getting pretty good at filling in those that look really, really good, rather than just like the old stamp tool that a lot of people are probably familiar with. And they've also got their own version of like the text to image prompts, similar to like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion. Some of y'all have heard some of those tools in the past. TestFit is one that a couple folks in our office have been using as well. That one's really cool. I've got an example of that in a second. Just being able to like in real time adjust building layouts and parking layouts on a site. It's wild to watch it work. Another one's Delve. That's in the kind of urban planning environment and solar design. A lot of people know it as like Sidewalk Labs. It's kind of a tool under them. Another text to image is just Microsoft Copilot. I've been using that a bunch, not so much for like professional stuff, but I have used it from time to time. Just getting some options. If I just throw out there, I'm like, how does this color trim look with this kind of brick? It's really cool to be able to just type that into something and just get some results, even if it's a little bit more abstract than like a photorealistic representation. I still get a lot of benefit out of it. I'll touch on SketchUp diffusion in a minute as well. It's wild what you can do with some really quick iterations of renderings and different just environments that your building is placed in. Upcode's Copilot, that's one that falls into the camp of the providing factual information, which I think, to me, it feels like it still has a ways to go, but the times that it's gotten stuff right, it's pretty impressive. It's pretty helpful. So we've got a large group of people here that have been using Upcodes. So I'm curious to see how much better it gets and how quickly that happens, because if it's at the current rate of AI development, that should be pretty quick. And then we've included still a bunch of these that we've mentioned before, Arco, Make It. I did add in Evolve Labs. I'll show that in a second. Works with Revit to kind of do something similar to SketchUp diffusion, architectures. All of these are just still great tools that have had development over the last year. I'm going to move on to a couple more specific examples. So like I mentioned, test fit, you got a preview of it on that very first slide of this presentation, but you're able to put in parameters as far as how big your site is and what kinds of spaces you want, what your parking parameters should be, and then you can just live kind of drag and modify all of these components, and they'll interact together. And if they need to maintain a specific parking space size, they will, and they'll create parking islands and create the drive aisles that are the standard widths. And then as far as the building, it'll keep corridors a certain width. It'll keep room sizes within a certain range. So in that early on kind of pre-design programming, or if you're doing master planning, this has just been such a cool tool to watch people use. And then going down to SketchUp diffusion, you can kind of see that GIF rotating through a bunch of options, but you see that the kind of blue sky option that has just the white boxes of the designs, like your standard SketchUp model. And then just within a few seconds, usually like no more than a minute, it can spit out a bunch of these different, like wildly different material palettes, environments for you to play around with when you're early on in design. Jumping back, talking about Revit generative design. So that top right example that's going through there, kind of showing how you can say, I really want to make this room is going to have a bunch of desks, but I want a bunch of different options as far as how they're laid out. And you can even start to see how the AI is even kind of processing through the different variables. So all the different, if I follow the top variable for this one, but then the middle variable for this one, and the second to the bottom, and then the top, and you can really kind of fine tune and refine those options and get live results that are then placing the real families in your model, which is pretty fun. There's also opportunities to do versions of this that incorporate like lighting and like mixing the term, but yeah, it's just a lot of fun to be able to use that live. And then finally, I think actually this is the second to last one, Delve. This helps a lot with kind of large scale massing on a site. So you can get early stage feedback on whether it's just the volume of some of these spaces or the solar impact. I know a lot of people in the sustainability realm will utilize this tool. It's pretty cool to just be able to crank out a bunch of options that aren't just, oh, well, this building is slightly tweaked, just like completely different schemes that would normally take someone or a whole team a lot more time to come up with and propose to, whether it's just the internal team or a client or whatnot. And then this last one, this is similar to the SketchUp tool, but it's within Revit. So Evolve Labs has a third-party tool, so they can very quickly create some of these high-quality material palettes and environments that kind of give you a really good early-stage rendering shockingly quickly. So that's a lot of fun to play around with as well. So that's a lot of the kind of tools and discovery that I've found over the last, really the development of those tools that I've seen come out over the last year. There's still so many more out there that I haven't even touched on. But I hope this is just a really helpful sort of jumping off point for a bunch of y'all to start kind of exploring, like, okay, well, I didn't really think about like that being possible before. So now I have even more questions, like, so just kind of getting the conversation started and getting you thinking about like some of the questions I have listed here, like, now what are your expectations of the next year? Like, were you satisfied with kind of what you've seen over the last year? Does it feel overwhelming? Does it feel underwhelming? Do you feel like the more you learn about it, the less confident you feel, or the more confident? You know, as we kind of move into more of a conversation time in this hour that we have, just kind of posing some questions related to that. Oh, and it'd be great to hear examples of folks that have been able to utilize some of these in real applications. So, Nathan, do you have anything you want to add on there?
No, I think, Chris, thank you for diving through some of what you've experienced over the past year. And these questions, I think, are really critical questions for each of us to ask, right? There's a reason you're all logged on today, right? I think each of us that has taken the time out of our day to be a part of these conversations is forward thinking, right? We're trying to look at what the future of what we're trying to do is. And these are important questions that I know I ask myself variants of these questions often. How far have we come? How far should we be going? And I love the end of the first question you put up there, Chris, which is how do we feel about that? Right. Are we comfortable with where we're heading? Are we not comfortable? And if we are comfortable, why? And how do we do more of that? And if we're not, why? And how do we resolve that? So I think these are important things for us to think about. And I saw we had a few questions pop up. So Tracy, I saw you put a question up related to digital twinning and automated BIM creation, leveraging machine learning. I know I personally don't have a lot of experience in the machine learning space for that. Most of my transition in digital twinning and creation of digital assets has been very much in that more manual space. We do a lot of manual work. Personally, we do a lot with laser scans tied with model creation. I haven't found a tool that I'm comfortable leveraging yet that does it automatically. And for a lot of the work that I do, there's some tools out there that I'm sure could help get us started. But at some point, a talented professional in the space is going to get to that level pretty quick anyway, and they'll spend more time kind of going through to figure out what's wrong than just starting off. But I'm really curious if anybody wants to jump into the chat with a tool they've used that's worked well to maybe give Tracy something to go look at as they're working to bring forward their university's buildings, which is a project near and dear to my heart, something I'm kind of involved with at the University of Florida, where I've spent all my time. And so anybody jump in the chat that has any ideas there. And then while people are maybe jumping in there, Chris, there was a question specifically for you about Esri tools.
Yeah, and I guess to add on to Tracy's question, I have not done much in that realm, but we did just have at the last in-person BIMxt event, I think it was the last in-person one. I was checking my notes. We had Rob, let's see. Yeah, Rob Fink from Quinn Evans did a really cool presentation about how they used Autodesk. Let's see, is it Tandem? Yeah. I don't know how much AI tools or how much they've integrated AI processes into that tool, but regardless, I would say that I wrote down so many things from that presentation. It was fascinating seeing how well that software and their process was able to kind of log and track all of these different assets and all these different categories. And it sounds very much like what you're dealing with the existing campus buildings. They had a couple examples of a project they did at Mount Vernon. And then another one was the Michigan State Capitol. And I know Rob's done that presentation in a couple places too. So
I can chime in, Chris and Nathan, actually, in response to Tracy's question, just 2 cents from my perspective. I do think this notion of automated scan to BIM is certainly like a goalpost a lot would like to reach. We approach it with a little bit of skepticism right now, because as you had alluded to, Nathan, there's some nuance to that, right? To getting like a really high quality, high fidelity digital representation of a facility, like quick. But what I will say, Tracy, is you might consider looking into an organization or company by the name of IPX. They are leading, I would say, they are one of the groups leading the charge on automated scan to BIM. And they have a really nice platform where you can essentially enter some basic project information, an ideal LOD, and they can spit out, a digital model pretty quickly based on that. I'm glazing over some of the complexity there, but IPX is the company you might want to look into.
Any other questions from folks in the chat? I know just this morning or last night, I was able to put my Apple Intelligence on my iPhone. They're taking baby steps. I'm finding the differences between kind of the slow and steady, and some of the folks who are like just out of the gate. Here we go. My gut tells me the out of the gate, here we go, guys, aren't going to be around super long. There's just sustainability and power and legal issues that I think they're all playing a little Wild West with, frankly. But that's it's my old man pessimist point of view on some of this stuff. I'm very excited by all of it, but I think like you all, going in with a little bit of skepticism and just, this is critical stuff, right? Design is important. Fire safety is important. Structural engineering is important. So, you got to make sure it really truly works before we hop in. But I think to Chris's point, I've certainly gone through and kind of sped up initial drafts of things, or have it take a shot to brainstorm and stir some ideas at this point.
Yeah, and I think to that point, Jason, the analogy I like to use with AI at the current moment is it's very similar to self-driving vehicles in my mind, where everybody wants to blame the vehicle for crashing, but like, just to be clear, you're still in charge of the vehicle, right? So like with AI, like you're going to use it to get this information, but at the end of the day, you're still the professional, like you're the one who has to make sure it's correct, right? And we saw a lot of early signs of that with some attorneys who got in some trouble and some different things where they just didn't review the material. And I think you're going to see some of that in our industry too, right? But I think at the end of the day, what it's going to do when you look at it is those errors. Hopefully what it does is reduce errors, right? And the reason I use the car example is everybody wants to talk about the car that was driving itself and crashed. Well, what about the 10, 100,000 times of cars that crashed that weren't being driven by themselves, right? So I think we're going to see something similar in our industry with AI, and it's just personal feeling is that we're going to have those bumps, right? You're going to see those bumps. There's going to be some highly publicized misses that everybody wants to talk about. But what they're not going to talk about is the thousands and thousands of daily examples where people leverage it to create efficiency, right? And so I know personally, I try to use it little bits here and there in low risk scenarios. And some of it for me is testing the rest of the senior leadership team and doing some things to see if they even notice that I didn't write it or that I didn't do it. And really just trying to push the envelope a little bit, but making sure you maintain total professional control over the content that you're responsible for. And so as we all navigate that together, I think that's going to be the special part about it in our industry is it still takes all of us to make sure we're not only meeting the letter of the code, but also the intent, right? And intent is that hard piece that we all struggle with day to day. So just wanted to share that because you sparked me with that idea with one of your comments there.
I love that analogy, Nathan, by the way. And I think like you're spot on. I mean, the way I view it is, first of all, it's almost overwhelming the number of tools out there that claim to be AI. So I do think for everyone on the line here, really the first step, in my opinion, is thinking strategically. Like, what is the use case or the problem to be solved that I really want to start with? And then I'm sure there's a tool that will help solve it for you. But ultimately, I see digital technology, AI, as getting us 80% of the way there. There's still that human intuition or insight that's needed on top of it, at least right now.
Certainly. And I think, Alec, what you said about solving, what's the problem first? It's something I talk about a lot with technological integration in our industry, which is, an area I've spent a lot of time, is that these are all just tools. And so if you pick them up like sledgehammers and swing them at everything, eventually it's going to knock something over. But the point is, how do you apply it? And there are certain areas where AI could solve the problem, but should it? And I use this one analogy with my team often, which has to do with the International Space Station. And so I ask them if they're creating an alternative to an O-ring, because the International Space Station has the top part of the station where you get all the pictures of the astronauts' heads up in the glass dome, right? Well, they had to be able to take the sun shields off that dome. And so they were trying to solve this complex engineering problem of how do you operate something from the inside and not the outside. And what it came down to was a very simple design of a very highly machined rod with like 4 O-rings on it. So there's only a handful of O-rings between the astronauts and outer space where they can mechanically turn this thing and the shields open. And so I use that as my O-ring example with the team. Like, are we overcomplicating, right? Are we trying to leverage AI to do something that, quite frankly, it just doesn't need to do? And I think that's going to continue to be the case, is like, how do we leverage it in areas that it can be successful without trying to overextend and overreach? And yes, we could automate that and solve that problem, but is it really helping? Does that actually get us where we need to go?
Yeah, well said, Nathan.
Awesome. Well, with that, great conversation, guys. I think I've determined I'm going to leave a typo in everything I write, so it's not AI generated at this point.
Although I think AI might figure that out at some point, Jason.
It's probably that's the way to do it, right? So wrapping things up, we really appreciate everybody's time. Thanks to the presenters. Thanks for the conversation here. We hope everybody picked something up. If you've got some ideas of what you want to present here for us, feel free to, I guess, take a screenshot of this guy and take a picture of the QR codes. We got the links here as well. Quick survey you can take. Give us some feedback on how things went. Again, presentation idea, and if you want to connect with us on LinkedIn, there is the link to our LinkedIn group as well. So with that, again, thanks to the presenters, thanks to everyone for joining us, and we are right at noon. So thanks everyone for your time, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.